And welcome to Capital Talk, a program we hope will have an impact on the future of Kenya. And now more than ever, I'm Jeff Koinange. Now, all this week we want to talk about issues. That's right, issues that pertain to us, issues that we don't necessarily talk about enough. And I'm talking about the ecosystem, the environment, and in particular the Mao. My guest today, I tell you, you need to sit back and listen because he knows what he's talking about. About 15 years ago, he was commissioned by the World Bank to go into a place in China called the Lus Plateau. It's a place about the size of Kenya, a place that had been horribly disfigured. The environment was completely gone, if you will. 15 years later, even less than that, the place was turned around. That's right, the ecosystem, rivers, trees, plant life, it's all back. What does this mean? Can we restore the Mao, for instance? 1/4 of the Mao, as most of you know, has been completely devastated. Can we restore that? He's had other successes. Rwanda, Ethiopia, Uganda. That's right, he says Africa can turn all this desertification, the floods, the rain, the mudslides, lack of rainfall. We can turn it around. He's a research fellow at George Mason University. He's also an international fellowship, researcher at the Rothamsted International, the oldest soil and agriculture research institute in the world. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to the environment. Wow. Believe me. Professor John Liu.
Hi, thank you.
Professor, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Welcome to Kenya.
Thank you.
Been to Africa many times before, and it's interesting that you say that Africa can turn all the negative aspects of the environment around. We can do it if we have the knowledge.
Well, I think you have to understand principles. If you disrupt natural trends, evolutionary trends, then you'll have a certain kind of result. If you don't, if you learn to work in harmony with nature, then you can have a very, very good outcome. Africa has many positive things in terms of ecology. Here you can generate biomass very, very rapidly, but you're reducing your biomass, you're burning biomass. So people burn sticks, they burn charcoal, they might even burn animal dung. And this means that you're not accumulating organic matter. So you've got to answer this, you've got to come up with another way to find energy. But you have abundant solar energy, you have hydropower, you have wind energy, and there's one thing that I'm really excited and interested in, which is methane production. And you can do this really, really well because you can do it, you can generate natural gas from any type of organic material. You can use animal manures, you can use human waste, you can use green leafy materials. Yeah. Now if you do this and you extract the methane, you also get the organic materials in the digestate, which can then be processed one more time using an aerobic digestion, and then return to the ground as fertilizer. So it's the fastest way to return organic fertilizer. So what you need to do in this regard is change the trend from decreasing organic matters in the soil to increasing organic matters in the soil. Everything will turn around if you do that.
Let's go back 15 years, Professor, and when the World Bank first sent you to China to see for yourself this vast area of a place that had been, nice forest, vegetation, rivers, everything that had been completely decimated. Did you think that place could have been turned around?
Well, actually, no. My experience of international agencies is often that they have very grand plans, but then the results are much more modest than the concept. This actually is one where the outcomes far out, were beyond what anybody imagined. So this went beyond what people thought was possible. And I think it's interesting to note that I would say that this is probably one of the most cost-effective methods of doing this. So the Chinese were looking at one thing that was quite similar to what you see in Africa: heavy sedimentation in river systems. So they have a river, it's actually historically called the Yellow River because it's filled with all these silts and it's just running very, very muddy. So the Yellow River was filled, actually they had 1,600,000,000 tons per year of soils going into this. Now they did an evaluation, they costed how mitigating or removing the sediments from the river or restoring this project. It was 4 times more expensive to mitigate than to do the entire restoration. So what's interesting about this is that's simply from sediment control. The project was entirely justified simply by sediment control. But in fact, the benefits were much larger. It was sequestering carbon. It was increasing fertility and productivity. It was regulating everything about this place, the soil moisture, the relative humidity, the healthful, sustainable part of this place was determined by having vegetation cover and having biodiversity. So none of that was calculated. None of the really wonderful benefits of carbon sequestration or increased productivity were actually calculated. It was simply sediment control that paid for the cost.
And when that project obviously succeeded and is still succeeding, did you think Africa could do the same thing? Because Ethiopia was one of your first stops and a place where famine has become almost, second place over there. And they had a devastating famine in '84. Haven't been able to turn that around completely. Rwanda is another place where you've done some work. Kenya, we're talking about the Mau. What made you think we could turn this around as well?
Well, actually, it wasn't me. I was tentative. You know, if you're not, I wasn't in a soil science program. I wasn't a professor. I was a journalist, and I was going out and documenting this. And so when I first started to present, I was just asked to present my findings in a scientific venue. And I was rather tentative. I showed the scientists what I was doing, and then they got really excited. They said, "That's extraordinary. These are extraordinary results." And I thought so, but I wasn't sure. Yeah. So then the Rothamsted Research Institute, the director was in one of the venues where I was presenting, and he invited me to have a fellowship there. And then I began to discuss with scientists and became much more secure. And I started to understand what's happening. Instead of simply looking at it, then I could explain why it was happening. And that was Ian Crute, the director of the Rothamsted Research Institute at the time, and he said, "Your research and what you're doing is most applicable in Africa. You must go to Africa." As soon as I said, "Oh, that's a good idea, I should go to Africa," then the World Bank and the British government, DFID, sent me, and actually the Global Environment Facility as well, sent me to Africa. So in 2006, when I first came, for that reason, I started presenting in these different venues, and I think it has had an effect. I'd like it to have a bigger effect, sure. But in wherever it has been tried, it has been successful. Yeah. So that suggests that these are principles which could be applied anywhere, and when they're applied at scale, then you get these benefits. Not simply do you get increased productivity and income, you do get that, but more importantly, you get a sustainable system so that the future could be better and consistently better and accumulate those positive benefits.